divisions, they are man-made. We have vice, but we cannot see. We've got to find a new way to be. This is a worldwide black family. No matter where you're from, Africa is still your home. Cuban or Dominican or Panamanian, no matter where you're from, Africa is still your home. Jamaican or American, Haitian or Brazilian, one Africa. Time has come for us to get free. It's time we break the chains of slavery. We've got to find a new way to be. This is a worldwide black family. No matter where you're from, Africa is still your home. Mexican, Colombian, or Boricano. No matter where you're from, Africa is still your home. Belizean or Peruvian, or Honduran. One Africa. Together.
This is Jacqueline Lukeman with The Real News. We talked in the first segment about Black Alliance for Peace, an organization that is 2 years old, that has a mission and a focus on reviving the Black radical anti-war tradition and focus in the United States. We talked in the first segment about NATO, the far reach of U.S. militarism, and specifically what the United States military is doing in Africa that many people in America know little to nothing about. But in this segment, we're going to talk about what all this means to Black people domestically. To continue this conversation, I am here joined today by Netfa Freeman. Netfa is the coordinating committee member for the Black Alliance for Peace. He's also an organizer with Pan-African Community Action, and Vanessa Beck. Vanessa is a member of the Black Alliance for Peace Research Committee and is also on the steering committee for Health Over Profit for Everyone. Thank you both for joining me again for this second segment.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
So you guys gave us a lot of information, a lot of very disturbing information, 800 military bases, U.S. military bases around the world, the expanded role of the United States military in Africa that few people know about, and NATO, the role of NATO. Let me ask you a question about NATO before we go into the domestic focus of the Black radical anti-war sentiment that needs to be revived. When people think about NATO, they usually think about the expansion of NATO in regard to the response of Russia to NATO. Do you think, Netfa, that overshadows what's being done in Africa in regard to NATO?
Yeah, it definitely overshadows. I mean, there's nothing. I think
that particularly our people need to understand what our political, economic, and social interests are. Russia is not our enemy. That's not what's happening. They're not killing us in the street every 28 hours. They're not the ones mass incarcerating us. They're not the ones with the big footprint on the African continent. It's the United States with a big footprint, military footprint on the African continent. I don't even know if Russia has, at most they might have one base there. And really what the interests are in terms of, it was strange because they also talk about China a lot. And they make it seem like, and China is very present on the African continent in a lot of ways. Still, it's not a military footprint. It's in, trade agreements and relationships that people could argue are for the interest of China, but so that's what every country, every governments and people do, but they're not bringing militarism. They don't have the same history of overthrowing governments and CIA coup d'etats. So this is the legacy of the United States in that. And so when they talk about that in the media and people end up focusing on it, we are not really focusing on things that are in our best interest or help us understand that at all. And if we don't understand the legacy and the nature of colonialism, not only that it applies to neocolonialism, all the trappings of independence, but with all of the same political and economic relationships and interests and power relations intact. That's known as neocolonialism. And it exists on the continent of Africa and also applies to us as Black people in the United States.
So that's a great segue into what I'm going to ask you, Vanessa. Why should Black people, why should anyone in the United States care about all of this information you've just given us about the expansion of the United States military state? But why should Black people care in particular, especially Black people in the United States? Why should Black people in Baltimore be concerned about what the United States military is doing in Africa?
Right. Very, very important question. So while the United States military was ramping up militarization in Africa, simultaneously, the Obama administration was ramping up militarization right here of colonized, Black and poor working class neighborhoods in the United States. And this involves even using some of the very same weapons and the very same tactics and techniques to kind of squash any kind of uprisings that occur. One thing I like to look at is life expectancy. Like, let's take the Upton Druid Hills neighborhood in Baltimore. So, and compare that to life expectancy in the wealthy white Roland Park area. In Roland Park, if you're lucky enough to be living there, your life expectancy is 84. Whereas in Upton, it is 68. And that is on par with nations that the United States occupies and bombs. It's more on par with that than it is the rest of the United States.
So we don't have a situation in Druid Hill where the United States is dropping bombs on the neighborhood, right? There's no one drone bombing Druid Hill. So how is American militarism abroad affecting the life expectancy of people in poor and especially poor Black neighborhoods? Where's the connection? Right.
Well, there is, militarization is not only about dropping bombs. It is also the threat of having militarized police and surveillance in a community. There are two programs domestically in particular that are responsible for this, occupied, I was going to say occupied feeling, but it's a reality, occupied reality in our neighborhoods. There's the 1033 program, which allows any kind of local police to obtain military weapons from the Pentagon at reduced rates or for free. And this even applies to school districts, and campus police can get these weapons. And then we also have what has been named the Deadly Exchange Program, which is a police exchange between U.S. police and Israeli police, where they trade tactics and techniques. Now, Israeli police, is known to be one of the most violent occupying police forces that there is. And Israeli police, meanwhile, recognize that United States police are a terrorizing force on Black people domestically. So there's this intensification of militarization that we particularly see, when Black people are uprising here over shootings or over conditions in their neighborhoods. Then it is very much out in the open. But this affects us, just the daily stress of living under these conditions affects our health even.
So under the 1033 program in particular, I'm recalling images from Ferguson, Missouri. I'm recalling images from right here in Baltimore during the Freddie Gray uprising, where you see police officers in what look like militarized vehicles, like tanks. So you're saying that they really do come from the Department of Defense. And not only can police departments, but you also said, Vanessa, campus police and school police, as in public school police, can obtain the same type of materials.
Yes. Armored vehicles, grenades, rifles, automatic weapons, and any of these kinds of military weapons are obtainable.
So, Netfa, what does Black Alliance for Peace do in order to combat these kinds of programs and also to educate and mobilize people to understand why they have to be aware of them and why they have to be opposed? What campaigns does Black Alliance for Peace have that people can be joined with?
So our three major campaigns was, the first one was the coalition is participating in the coalition to close U.S. military bases around the world. And then we've done that since a coalition, there's a lot of direct action and things like that. The two main campaigns that are pretty much, I don't even know if it's actually kind of one campaign, but they're two things. We see them as one, but two components to it is, first, the U.S. out of Africa Shutdown AFRICOM, where in both of these we're using petition drives, direct teach-ins, things like that, going on, doing media, doing propaganda work in terms of, well, people, I use the term propaganda work. I know people might not be used to it that way, but it's really just passing around information, right, for a particular purpose.
Yes.
But it becomes as a, word, charged word. But we pass out information about it. We do media about it. We do going on, like we went on the Hill. So we're trying to get other policymakers to understand and maybe set some resolutions or legislation or whatever around these kind of things. Briefings like the one we're going to try to do a briefing on the Hill, get the policymakers to do a briefing on the Hill about the impact of AFRICOM. And so we want all the withdrawal of all U.S. military presence out of the continent, and then for there to be this briefing that talks about the impact of it. And then that I mentioned, the other side of the domestic side is no compromise, no retreat.
Yes.
Can you tell me the rest of looking at
defeat the war against African Black people in the United States.
In the United States. And so those are the two things. And then one part of this campaign has to be, and we actually have both organization members and individual members. So we want organizations, Black organizations that want to take up this call to join the Black Alliance for Peace, and so we can coordinate our activities around these things. One is to get the policymakers to have an unequivocal position on what AFRICOM, militarism in our communities, the 1033 program, AFRICOM, to not be able, because right now they're not even talking about it. You would think it's just not, it doesn't even exist. We had, in fact, just recently, there was a bill, a few years ago, a bill by Grayson to repeal 1033 program. And a lot of the the Congressional Black Caucus members or the Black representatives voted against that bill. And so, and right now they don't even talk about AFRICOM. They act like they don't even know it exists. And so we want to change that.
So how do people get connected with Black Alliance for Peace?
Well, let me say, like particularly if you are an individual or part of an organization who wants to get involved with the domestic campaign against militarism and imperialism, you can go to blackallianceforpeace.com/no compromise, no retreat. And you know, we'll keep you informed as we're rolling out this campaign. We're in the process of, you know, talking with other organizations so that we can build a national steering committee to really, you know, ramp up the organizing on these issues. And then info@blackallianceforpeace.com. Right, is our email address if you generally want to get connected, and our website, of course, blackallianceforpeace.com. And shout out if you live in Baltimore, we're building local alliances, and you know, I'm helping to organize one in Baltimore. So also, you know, email us at the info address.
Net for free.
Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon. It's Monica and Onyesawu with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. You have joined us for Pan-African Weekly News. We are so glad that you've joined us. You were just watching a video that also shared information on AFRICOM, which we're also going to go into today. We thank you for being here. AAPRP is all over. And we are about organizing a one unified socialist Africa. It was started by Kwame Nkrumah. And we are about organizing our people, no matter where they are, all Africans across the continent, in this country and other countries. We know that Africa, our people won't be free until Africa is free, which is why we call for the unification of Africa. What is this? This is Pan-African Weekly News. We share real things that's happening in our communities, especially across what's happening like in Africa and other countries, because you will not get this real media anywhere. The media is controlled. Well, I don't want to say anywhere. I shouldn't say that because there's lots of folks doing that. But the media is controlled. You definitely won't get it on your local news for sure. We won't get it in reading in local articles either. And so we're glad that you're here. On the show, we also always call on an ancestor. We know that we would not be here for the sacrifice and the dedication of our ancestors, of our elders who have continued to fight for the liberation of our people. Today, we're going to be calling in Fannie Lou Hamer, who was an African revolutionary organizer with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Committee. And she actually, yesterday she died, was the anniversary of her passing, on night of her birthday. She was born October 6, 1917, and she passed March 14, 1977. Thank you so much, Onyesawu. As an organizer, she was organizing the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party, which was organizing, contrary to what people believe, not organizing the right to vote, but within the Democratic Party, but organizing the right to vote and building a new party, a party that represented African people, a party that represents the interest of the people, not in the Democratic Party. And as an organizer, she was harassed, she was shot at, she was beat by police, she was beat by white supremacists. Also, she was forcibly beat by two African people who were imprisoned. They beat her almost to death. That left her permanently with some disabilities where she was vision impaired, as well as internal damage because they were beating her with clubs, and internal damage to her kidneys. She continued to organize even after that happened, was able to do some recovery. And she was also invited by the president of Guinea, Sékou Touré, invited her. And what Sékou Touré, Guinea was liberated by the PDG, in Guinea, and they invited her there. And I'm going to read a quote that she shares upon meeting with President Sékou Touré in Guinea. The only thing I really feel is necessary is that the Black people, not only in Mississippi, will have to actually upset this apple cart. What I mean by that is so many things are under the cover that will have to be swept out and shown to this world, this whole world, not just to America. This thing they say of the land of the free and the home of the brave is all on paper. It doesn't really mean anything to us. The only way we can make this thing a reality in America is to do all we can to destroy this system and bring this out to the light that has been under the cover all these years. That's why I believe in Christianity, because the scripture says the things that have been done in the dark will be known on the housetops. Now, many things are beginning to come out, and it is truly a reality to me when I went to Africa, to Guinea. The little things that had been taught to me about the African people, that they were heathens, savages, and they were just downright stupid people. But when I got to Guinea, we were greeted by the government of Guinea, which is Black people, and we stayed at the place that was the government building because we were the guest of the government. You don't know what that meant to me when I got to Guinea on the 12th of September. The president of Guinea, Sékou Touré, came to us on the 13th. Now you know, I don't know how you can compare this by me. So much. Thank you. Compared this by me being able to see a president of a country when I have just been there 2 days. And here I have been in America, born in America, and I am 46 years pleading with the president for the last 2 to 3 years to give us a chance. And the president of Guinea recognized us enough to talk to us. Wow, powerful. So much beauty, so much power, exactly what Fannie Lou Hamer is saying, like this system has to be destroyed, right? It will not benefit us. It is not about the people. Again, the lies they tell us about our own people in Africa, right? To keep us apart from our own people. And 2 years pleading with the president, right? For human rights, and not even an acknowledgement, not even a meeting. And within 2 days, well, actually the second day that Fannie Lou Hamer was there, met with the president, Sékou Touré. And so it's just beautiful. You know, I just so thankful for our ancestors, so thankful for this quote and this information, and just uplifting Fannie Lou Hamer for all her sacrifices and the sacrifices she did organizing in SNCC and with so many of our other ancestors fighting for our freedom. So we honor Fannie Lou Hamer today on the show. The other thing that we do is we call in we also do a land acknowledgement, and we do this wholeheartedly, knowing that we're on stolen land. We're on Tiwa territory in so-called Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we know that this land is stolen. Everything here was built on Turtle Island on stolen land. And we organize in solidarity with our indigenous relatives for that land back. And we also organize when we say a one unified socialist Africa, we're organizing for our land back in Africa. So any land that's been stolen to any people, land in Cuba, land in Palestine, Turtle Island, land in Africa needs to be returned to its rightful owners. And so we are in solidarity with our indigenous relatives. So today for our political education, we are going to be talking about the movement to shut down AFRICOM. And so how AFRICOM was started was under the Bush Jr.'s administration. It's part of the US Empire's Department of Defense. It's one of the 11 defense mechanisms. And it started literally right before Obama was in president. And what it was supposed to do, supposedly on paper, right? Kind of going back to Fannie Lou Hamer's, what it says on paper was to fight terrorism. And that's not what it does, right? So contrary to what you will Google and see, if you Google and it has the United States empire on it, it's going to say that we're fighting terrorism, when in fact what it's done is, in the past 13 years of its existence, has created more terrorism in Africa. And so the real purpose is to control the military, to control the land, to control the resources, to control the labor. And we know this, like that shouldn't be shocking. That shouldn't be surprising at all if you've been following this show, if you do any political education on what empires do and what the US empires and other countries have been doing in Africa. So they've also been part of like doing coups, right? Coups in several different countries. And also AFRICOM was part of the coup that brutally publicly murdered Gaddafi. And what Gaddafi was doing at the time was trying to develop a currency that was controlled by Libya, as well as that's controlled by the people, and refuse around AFRICOM being there. And so as a result, they organized all this false rhetoric and also got Gaddafi murdered. So in its time of these 13 years, there are now 46 military bases there. And there's a base in 53 of 54 countries in Africa. So there's been coups that have happened, like in several other places as well. For example, the Tunde Ozuna, it played a role in training police forces all over the continent. The Africa Center for Strategic Studies, which is formerly the Africa Center for Security Studies. So it provided, basically with this training, it provided the next generation of African police officers, but that are trained by militarized, right? Militarized to actually create more harm, because that's what we know what police do, right? What their role is to create harm, to do killings and all that. It also enabled terrorism to just disperse, right? There's so much terrorism going on. We also, many of you have probably seen like enslavement happening in Libya, like all that is being done because of what AFRICOM is doing there. The other thing is it's done strikes. So drone strikes, year after year, drone strikes, they receive billions in aid. So for example, they had, I believe it was 2020, $239 million is what AFRICOM has. And it was an increase of 38.5 million. Why would they need that much money in Africa? It's only to kill people, right? It's only to kill people. It's only to train police. It's only to extract resources. There's no reason why AFRICOM, part of the US empire's defense, would need $239 million unless it was doing something bad. We already know how this country works, right? So it also creates this stance of like, it's Al Qaeda. We're doing war against Al Qaeda, right? And which isn't true. And what it's doing is it's destabilizing what's happening there. And it's also like doing drone strikes, like killing masses of people, right? And it's building the military under AFRICOM, right? Which is being controlled. So that the militarization there is actually being controlled by this country because it's under AFRICOM. The other thing is the movements. There's different movements that are happening in Africa because of the terrorism that's happening there, right? So it's attacking like pan-Africanism. It's attacking the movements that are fighting there for justice as well. It's also deepened more capitalism and imperialism there by controlling like land and resources. So I'm gonna turn it on to Onyesawu to share a little bit more about AFRICOM and ways to stop it.
Thanks, Monica. So yeah, as Monica discussed, the stated purpose of AFRICOM, which is short for the U.S. Military's Africa Command, the purpose that the U.S. empire shares for why AFRICOM exists is to fight the war on terror on the African continent. But like Monica just pointed out, before AFRICOM existed in Africa, terrorism was a fairly localized phenomenon. It happened in like a handful, like maybe one or two nations. after AFRICOM, in the 13 years that AFRICOM has existed, terrorism has proliferated across the African continent. Now it is happening on a transnational basis. And so by every measure, terrorism is actually worse in response to the U.S. so-called counterterrorism efforts in Africa. So you can tell off the bat that even though they say it's about fighting terrorism, if the actual problem is worse because of their actions, then that actually can't be what it's about. And like Monica pointed out, AFRICOM engages in a series of trainings and fundings of military forces, of mercenary forces, and also police forces, crucially, in the African continent. It is straight up a coup factory because these African military leaders that are trained by AFRICOM, that are trained by NATO, that are trained by imperialist military forces, then turn around and frequently carry out coups against inconvenient leaders on the African continent. We actually just saw this happen this past month in Guinea, when a leader that was too conservative about sharing the bauxite was overthrown by a military leader who immediately came into power and was like, we're going to make sure that Guinea stays open for business while we're suspending the constitution, suspending the parliament. So that has happened at least a dozen times in the African continent, where we see leaders who are not necessarily progressive, are not necessarily like revolutionary socialists, but are in some way standing against imperialist aims in Africa, being pushed out by military forces that have been trained by AFRICOM, that have been trained by NATO. That's why we call it a coup factory, because just coincidentally, all these people that receive political, military, and ideological training from AFRICOM and from imperialist military forces then turn around and seize power. So that's happening. Additionally, AFRICOM is also collaborating with police forces in Africa to train them on how to repress African people's movements. Just like Jackie discussed in that video from The Real News, where she interviewed the BAP comrades, Vanessa Beck and Nefa Freeman. Just like Jackie points out in that video, that through the 1033 program here in the United States, police are receiving surplus military weapons that they're using to repress domestic African movements. Precisely the same scenario is unfolding in the African continent under the direction of AFRICOM. African police forces for neocolonial states are being provided with weapons, with funding, with training that they are then turning around to use on peaceful African protests for social justice. This past summer, the latest example, one of the most recent examples, was the NSARS movement in Nigeria. SARS is the Nigerian counterpart to the US SWAT forces. It is a militarized police force that intentionally targets youth, that intentionally targets poor and working class people with tanks and shit. So, the US military through AFRICOM is literally recreating the conditions of police violence that we are experiencing in our communities across the United States in Africa. It's the same people, oftentimes with the same funding and certainly the same ideological direction. Additionally, so you might ask yourself, why, what is the point of this? They say they're fighting terror, but terrorism is worse. They're funding police and training police in Africa that are repressing African people, that are repressing African people's movements. They're engaging in drone warfare where they are killing civilians across the African continent. It's not just happening in Afghanistan. It's not just happening in the Middle East. It's also happening in places like Somalia. It's also happening in places like Tanzania. There's a drone base in Cameroon that supplies drones for the entire Eastern Hemisphere. So why are they doing this? It's because of what Monica just said. The masses of people on the African continent are consistently rising up, resisting imperialism. We have been taught a lie about the passivity of African people, whether it's resisting slavery, whether it's resisting colonization. We have been taught that our people never fought back. But the reality is that the African continent is constantly ablaze. It's constantly experiencing massive uprisings of African people that we simply don't hear about in the United States. Every so often it pops into popular consciousness like NSARS did because of the strength of social media organizing from youth. But for the most part, when people in Africa rise up, we don't hear about it on the news. But the US empire does know about it. The US empire does hear about it. And AFRICOM is one of the strategies that they have deployed to attempt to repress those movements. They need to keep the masses of people on the continent and the masses of people in the United States divided and disorganized. And so in order to do this, they fund and train police. They give police military weapons. They prop up puppet leaders that will do their bidding. And the intent of all of these things is to make sure that those mass movements do not erupt into a revolutionary struggle that will counter U.S. imperialist power on the continent. This is what they're doing. AFRICOM is a program of counterinsurgency. AFRICOM is a program of counter-revolution. They are trying to prevent the unification of Africa. They are trying to prevent African people's social justice movements from gaining power. They need Africa divided. They need Africa disorganized because they want to secure access to African land, labor, and resources, period. Especially as like catastrophic climate change is looming down and there's no plan for ending capitalist destruction of the environment. The U.S. empire and imperialist nations want to make sure that they have access to those sweet, sweet African resources, including the water, so that when catastrophic climate change is front and center, when we are competing for resources in order to survive, that U.S. corporations, Western corporations will still have the resources they need stolen from Africa to keep it going. So that's why they're doing it. They want to make sure that African people cannot control Africa. And they're using the military and the police and these military bases to ensure that happens. So, understanding that, hopefully it's clear why we as Africans in the belly of the beast, we as Africans in the West, have to build a movement to stop AFRICOM. Like we've already laid out, both in the Real News video and also in this stream right now, the same people that are giving the police in our neighborhoods tanks are training and funding police and military forces that are repressing our counterparts on the continent. It's the same people. It's the same Department of Defense. And so in order to build a movement to shut down AFRICOM, and let me pause and just say, we're doing this show as part of, is our contribution to Black Alliance for Peace's International Month of Action to shut down AFRICOM. The African People's Revolutionary Party is a part of Black Alliance for Peace. The African People's Revolutionary Party has our own campaigns letting people know about NATO and AFRICOM, and so it was a natural fit. So we are joining this International Month of Action because we understand the very first step to shutting down AFRICOM is to raise our people's consciousness about what's actually happening. They have worked, our enemy has worked very, very, very hard to separate African people in the United States from African people in Africa. And so we need to do the work of letting our people know that what is happening in Africa directly affects us. And one of the key steps we can do to take to do that is to point out that domestic repression of African people and African communities has a clear parallel to what AFRICOM is doing in Africa. That again, the same people arming the police in our hoods with tanks are arming the police in Nigeria with tanks as well. The same people training police in the United States to choke us to death, to brutalize us, to repress us, to surveil us, are providing the same training to neo-colonial police and military forces in Africa to do the same thing to poor and working class people in Africa. So we have to relentlessly connect domestic struggles against police terrorism and police repression to international struggles against police terrorism and police repression. You might have heard people say before that the United States empire is the world's police, and that is an extremely accurate statement. The United States is the pig of the world, and the United States exports these strategies of repression all over this planet, not just in Africa, but also in Central and South America, also in the Caribbean, also in occupied Palestine. There's this global network of pig work working to oppress African colonized people all around this planet. It's not just about what's happening to us in the police in the United States. It's connecting the funding, the training, and the ideological position of that repression to what is imperialism is doing all around the planet. So we have to do what Black Alliance for Peace excels at doing. We have to connect the domestic to the international every single time. We have to tear down that false dichotomy that exists in U.S. politics, where we say we have to focus on domestic issues and international issues are a secondary concern. Absolutely not. That is a false dichotomy. It is the same people that are giving us hell all over the planet, and we need to point it out. So that's the first step. Build the consciousness of the masses of our people, of African people, about the connections between what is happening to us domestically and what is happening to us all around the world. That's why we're doing these teach-ins. an alliance with Black Alliance for Peace. That's why we focus so much political education on teaching folks about imperialism and about AFRICOM. The other thing that we need to do is as we start to raise this consciousness, we have to organize a mass movement that makes those connections between domestic and international issues, and that makes those connections between domestic police terrorism in Africa, and refuses to allow the separation between African people in the diaspora and in the continent. We have to say that we are Africans first and foremost, that we understand the liberation and struggles of African people all over the world as connected as one struggle, and to say that we're not going to fight for better rights here while ignoring what the US government is doing in our name on the African continent. So those are the first steps. First, we have to raise the consciousness. First, we have to educate people about the basics of AFRICOM. There has been historically a long tradition of internationalism in the revolutionary African liberation struggle that our enemy has worked to deliberately attack over the past few decades, with figures like Colin Powell, figures like Condoleezza Rice, figures like the Obama attempting to align African people in the United States to the US empire in order to further separate us from Africans in Africa and the diaspora. We have to reject that process. We have to say that we are not so-called African Americans, that we are Africans, period, and that what the US empire is doing to Africans around the world in our name with our tax dollars, we do not stand for. We have to build a movement that says we are Africans first and we are fighting for the liberation of Africa, even if it means taking on the US empire directly. Let me see what y'all are saying in the comments. Hashtag Shutdown AFRICOM. Absolutely. Ricky Ryan, comrade from Hood Communist, is also pointing out that alongside AFRICOM, also NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, military coalition of European powers, is also engaging in this funding and training of police and military oppression on the African continent. Absolutely. Also Israel, through the so-called Deadly Exchange Program that we learned about from our comrades in the Red Nation, trains U.S. police forces on how to repress and surveil us, like the kneeling on the neck that murdered George Floyd in Minneapolis was taught to the pigs in Minneapolis by the Israeli Defense Forces. So regularly, U.S. police agencies will train in Israel about how to better oppress us. And the very same process unfolds in Africa, unfolds in Central and South America, particularly in places like Colombia that are basically just U.S. puppet states. There is a global network of cooperation, of technology sharing, of training, of funding that exists solely to repress revolutionary African and colonized movements. They are working together on a global basis to keep us down, yo. This is why we have to make these connections globally, because the enemy already has. So thank you for pointing that out, Ricky. Lots of hashtags, Shutdown AFRICOM. Also, we dropped a link on Facebook for the Black Alliance for Peace's International Month of Action Against AFRICOM. Please check it out on the Black Alliance for Peace website. But like we said, the very first step to building the mass African people's movement that we need to stop AFRICOM, to force the US out of Africa, the very first step is engaging in political education just like this. And so we encourage folks to go to the Black Alliance for Peace website. They have a teaching guide. They have an introductory document sharing basic facts about AFRICOM. They have articles, they have interviews, they have videos. So all the things you need to get up to speed on what AFRICOM is and how we can stop it, you can find on the Black Alliance for Peace website. We encourage you to check that out. They also have, like I mentioned, a step-by-step guide to organizing your own teaching to educate people about AFRICOM. And so we all need to be engaged in this work. If you have an organization that is looking for a new teaching topic, or if you want to jump into this International Month of Action, check out that guide on the Black Alliance for Peace website and organize your own. We have to educate our people about what the US empire is doing in Africa. They intentionally do not talk about AFRICOM on the news. Many people don't even know there are tens of thousands of US troops on the ground in Africa as we speak. The only time we ever hear about it is when the Africans on the continent get tired of it and kill some of them, and then they're on the news. Like there was one in New Mexico, wasn't there? There was a dude in New Mexico who was killed in Mali at a US military base, and they give him like a hero's burial. And I remember people being like, wait, Why are there U.S. troops in Mali? There are tens of thousands of U.S. troops in Africa right now under AFRICOM, and most people have no idea. Even African people who are Afrocentric have no idea. So we have to engage in like this very basic consciousness raising work to educate our people about what is actually happening, because it's very intentionally kept from us. So please check that out. And then as we start to engage in this political education work, we also have to make sure that every time we are organizing or mobilizing against police terrorism in the United States, that we are intentionally working to make those international connections. The way I put it is internationalize everything. Internationalize everything. I know Monica has heard me say this in the meeting because I say it constantly. Like for the anti-war coalition's work, for anti-police violence work here in Tiwa territory, for even struggles around healthcare, struggles around housing, it's extremely important that we break down that false dichotomy that exists in U.S. politics between the domestic and the international. We live in an empire. There's no domestic issue that is not directly connected to imperialism, to the role that the U.S. plays on the world. So we have a responsibility every time we organize domestically to work to internationalize those issues. And it's not difficult. Like I said, the same people giving the police in our neighborhoods tanks are giving police in Nigeria tanks, are giving police in Mali, in Somalia, in Cameroon, in Togo, tanks as well. So if we are deliberate and intentional about making those connections, we can begin to build the movement we need that will both improve conditions for us domestically while also fighting in solidarity with Africans all around the world. That is the task before us. We can absolutely do it. So that was, let me see what else they are saying. Oh yeah, there was an African killed in Mali too that Trump would have recognized. Oftentimes the US military will intentionally work to hide deaths of US military forces. They like hold these people up as heroes. They say we honor your sacrifice, and then they get killed in action and they just like lie about it. Or they like come off duty and then like get PTSD and depressed and they get no support, no healthcare. So they're just like they're just using these people up, using them up. Use them to attack Africa and not even having their backs on a basic level. On a basic level. Actually, this is like unrelated, but one of my favorite examples of that is during the Bay of Pigs invasion that the U.S. attempted in Cuba, that the Cuban people like put down. They were like, get the hell out of here, chase the United States out. During the Bay of Pigs invasion, U.S. Fighter jet was shot down. The pilot died. The U.S. would not admit that they had anything to do with the Bay of Pigs, and so they left that man's body in Cuba and would not acknowledge his existence for like decades. Like his family was like, what happened? Like Cuba put the plane on display and the US was like, we had no idea what happened. And then like years later, they were like, okay, fine, we were part of it. And they claimed his body. But they literally left that man to rot in Cuba after he gave his life for their imperialist aims. That's an example of how the US actually treats its troops. They are disposable. They are signing up to be used as cannon fodder and imperialist projects, and the U.S. does not give us like not a single crap about those people whatsoever. We'll let them die. Anywho, internationalize everything. Absolutely agree. Sally Fu says what they do here always goes out and happens abroad. Always comes back to us. Yes, it does. There is no technology of repression, no strategy of repression that the U.S. empire deploys in other places that will not eventually be used against colonized populations within the United States. Almost every police agency in the United States has access to these surplus military weapons that include drones, that include tanks, that include assault rifles, that include robots. Robots! All of those things were previously used in U.S. imperialist interventions around the world, and then they were handed to U.S. police to use against you and your family. Do you understand the clear connection between what the U.S. empire does abroad and what they are doing to us here? It's literally with the same weapons, the same funding, the same ideological backing. Everything that the U.S. visits upon the most oppressed around the world, we can guarantee will be brought back to us. And that's another reason to fight it. Another reason to make these connections across borders. Ricky says the internet said Squid Game ain't nothing but the U.S. military. I guess Squid Game is like the Netflix show that I'm kind of afraid to watch. But
I watched it. I watched it, and for real, it is nothing but the U.S. military. I agree with that comment. It's it's a trip, but it's definitely about putting people against each other. There's a lot of links in there. Avery wants to watch it. I'm like, I'm not sure, but since it's like big, there's like, it's all over YouTube. They have kid games up with it now. So I think, watch it and have a conversation about it. But I could definitely see the parallels with the US military, all about control. And yeah, it's deep.
I was kind of afraid to watch it because I heard it was like a lot of just like random violence. So yeah, maybe I'll check it out because I've seen you. So you just vouched for it, and then I heard someone else say it was like a metaphor for capitalism. So maybe I'll watch it. But
it's definitely all about capitalism in there. All about it.
All right. Well, thanks, y'all. Thanks for the recommendation. And Sally was saying it's worth watching, so we'll check it out. But anyway, please check out the Black Alliance for Peace's campaign website for the International Month of Action to shut down AFRICOM. Please search for Black Alliance for Peace on YouTube and watch all of the videos you find. And please begin to internationalize every single aspect of your organizing, no matter what issue you are organizing around, but especially if it's around police terrorism, especially if it's around how the capitalist system is attacking us domestically. Make those connections to AFRICOM. Make those connections to U.S. imperialist interventions around the world, and we can begin to build a movement that is going to take this enemy out for good. The only way that we're going to achieve this is if we are fighting from the inside and that the rest of the diaspora is fighting from the outside. If we build that kind of organization, we will be able to force the U.S. out of Africa and force these militarized police out of our communities. So that was the PE section of the show. We hope that you enjoyed it. We're going to keep it moving, especially because I think that Monica has to go in like 9 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Anya Sawu, for sharing more context about AFRICOM and ways that we need to get involved to make sure we're engaging folks and bringing an awareness about what's happening to our people in Africa. The war in Africa must end against our people there, against our people everywhere, against our people here. So we have to definitely get involved. So thank you so much. So some local updates. We have our Pan-African Community Garden. We're still staying strong. We're going to be there every Sunday until the end of October at 4 p.m. Come join us. We might do one event in November. We're thinking about it. We're just watching the weather and watching the COVID numbers, but excited that this garden has been grown together by community. Like we literally grew food using olas, which are African rooted, right? From our people, an irrigation system. I mean, I'm trying to think what we had. Oh, our corn didn't fully make it, but we had 2 baby corn, blue corn. They're so cute. They're so cute. But we know we learned a lot around what we can also do next time, but our greens are still strong. Peas out there. We got some goji berries, is that what it's called? I always mess it up. Goji berries out there. So we've been able to harvest literally every time we go to the garden. We've been able to harvest. You can go out there and harvest tomatoes. Tomatoes are still good for, we're hoping, the next 2 weeks. So join us. We're going to be at the Pan-African Garden this Sunday, 4 p.m. And we'll have more information. You can always check out the Facebook page for the location. It's on Arno and Cesar Chavez and Tiwa territory. Our elder care program, we started this at the beginning of the pandemic, delivering to our elders care packages. So if you know an elder that could receive a care package and political education, please send them to us because we can share that resource with them. We're excited because every second Saturday of the month, we have our Pan-African film series. This has been happening for, is it 3 years or 4 years now? My brain, 3 years, 3 years. At 2 p.m. every Saturday. We used to do this in person. Now we do it virtually to make sure we're all safe. We're doing a screening documentary of Mugabe, Villain Our Hero. Join us for watching that, as well as a discussion afterwards. We are also in solidarity for ending imperialism, ending the embargo that's in Cuba. And so there's the Cuba Solidarity Caravan that is happens every last Sunday of the month. So that is happening on October 31st at noon. We're going to meet at San Mateo and Copper, and we're going to do a caravan down to Robinson Park on 10th Street and share food. And there'll be speakers and political education on what we can do to be in solidarity with Cuba. So make sure to join us there. Also, regarding Cuba, there's going to be an anti-war coalition and anti-communist and imperialism panel on November 11th at 6 p.m. So more information will be shared. Join us for that panel. So those are some local updates, and I'm going to turn it over back to Onya Sawu.
Cool. I just wanted to add for the car caravan. So the October car caravan actually falls on Halloween. So, not in addition to the regular caravan, in addition to the rally and food from our comrades at John Brown Breakfast Club at Robinson Park, we're actually also asking the folks to dress up. You can dress up as the hero from the Cuban Revolution. You can dress up as some kind of like spooky specter of imperialism. Whatever you want. Be creative. Just tie it into Cuba or tie it into anti-imperialism and join us at the park. And hopefully we can get like a lot of people in costumes so we can take a really sweet picture. And then also,
Nice.
Yes, I know. I'm very I think I want to dress like Fidel Castro. Okay, so also for the anti-war coalitions, the panel, it's one of the most recent event the AAPRP Anti-War Coalition is organizing. We took like a little break to regroup for a few months, and so we're excited to come back. And that panel is going to be great because we're going to be talking about how imperialism intentionally works to spread anti-communism, to attack even the possibility of communism existing and why that happens. So I'm super excited for that. Anywho, let's get to the closing. So it's still a pandemic. It's still a pandemic. Joe Biden is trying to say it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated because he's trying to humanize unvaccinated people. He's trying to get y'all to blame people who don't want to get the vaccine instead of clearly pointing the finger at the failed COVID-19 response that came from the very top of the United States. He's like, no, don't focus on me. Focus on those other poor people. So that's actually what we're living through right now. But the reality of the situation is that even vaccinated people can still catch and spread COVID. And so we should never have stopped the COVID-19, like the bare minimum measures that existed, like the lockdowns, like the eviction moratoriums, like the mask mandates, like the contact tracing. All of that should never have stopped. And when Joe Biden came in and tried to have like his mission accomplished moment, told people, the CDC told people to stop wearing masks, started saying if you're vaccinated, you can like hang out outside willy-nilly, hang out inside willy-nilly. Those were serious mistakes. And they are the reason why we are living through a spike in COVID-19 cases throughout the entire US, despite these vaccines. And we are living through this spike with no lockdown, with no contact tracing, with no national health care. All of the eviction moratoriums have expired. So we are literally facing this pandemic down with no mitigation measures whatsoever. And that was an intentional decision of the people put in power to address the situation. Everybody thought that Biden was going to be better than Trump on COVID. And Biden came in and said, hold my beer, I'm about to make this so much worse. And no one's saying anything. No one's saying anything. They're just literally blaming other poor people. It's terrible. So this is still a pandemic. You still got to wear your mask. I do not go outside around other people without a mask. And I had never stopped. When the CDC said that, I was like, oh God, like I never stopped because it's not over, because I have both doses of the vaccine, but I know that I can still catch it and make my comrades sick. So I continue to wear a mask, I continue to social distance, and we are continuing to raise these issues to point out that we should not be blaming other poor and working class people, even if they're not vaccinated, that all of the blame for this pandemic continuing to escalate in the United States falls on the people in power, period. Stop letting them convince you to blame other poor people. Point your finger up. Up is the right direction to be pointing fingers, not down. So please wear your mask, please social distance, and most importantly, please join an organization that is fighting for the pandemic response that is actually going to save lives, that is fighting for not just eviction moratoriums, but rent cancellation. Cancel the rent. Cancel the rent. The only reason people have like thousands of dollars in debt as a response, as a consequence of staying home during this pandemic, is because there's no safety net for poor and working class people in the United States. The only safety net that exists is for rich ass people and companies. Everybody else has been left to die, and that is not fair. So we need to call for not just eviction moratoriums, but rent cancellation. We need to call for nationalized health care in the United States, which Joe Biden has said conclusively is not on the table for him as an option. but that is what we need. It is a global pandemic, and there are millions of people who, if they had to go to the ER, they could not afford to do that. There are millions of people who, if they catch long COVID, they cannot afford the medical care. If they catch COVID at all, they cannot go to the doctor. There's a whole bunch of people for whom, like, CVS is the primary means by which they receive medical care if they can afford it. And many, many people can't. It makes no sense. So we need nationalized healthcare in the United States. We need contact tracing. There has never been a point in this pandemic in the United States, the so-called first world nation, where people have had any idea whatsoever how many folks have actually had COVID. There has never been a point where they had accurate numbers about how many COVID-19 cases have existed in the United States. Never. That's never happened because they weren't even trying to track it. Trump was like, don't bother me with this. Biden was like, let's focus on the vaccine. They have no idea. They have no idea. Meanwhile, in Cuba, where we're being told it's like a socialist wasteland, a dictatorship, the people are suffering. They vaccinated 82% of the population. They sent doctors door to door, educate people about the virus. They have engaged in comprehensive contact tracing. So they had know exactly how many people have it because they care about the well-being of their citizens. The United States is such a mess. So join an organization, fight for these basic pandemic response measures that are going to keep people alive, because this pandemic is going to continue to escalate. This winter is going to be really bad, y'all. It's going to be really bad. We're basically at the same number of deaths and infections that we were last fall, except last fall there was a lockdown, and this fall there's nothing. So it's going to be very bad. So those are your COVID-19 reminders. We are the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter. This has been Weekly Pan-African News. We're going to be back next Thursday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. We have a new time going forward. 1 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll be back next Thursday. We're going to be talking about Cuba because some U.S. imperialist attacks on Cuba are going to pop off beginning early next week. So we want to talk about why that's happening, provide all with some context for the situation. Also, for the rest of October, we will be doing these shows every single Thursday. But starting in November, we're going to start doing them bi-monthly, so twice a month. Because y'all, to be honest with you, it's like a lot. It's like a lot in the middle of a workday. So we're going to scale it back and be able to do more prep work for our shows. So beginning in November, we're going to do, is it the first and third Thursday?
Second and fourth.
Okay, thank you. Beginning in November, the Weekly Pan-African News will be on the second and fourth Thursday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. And the first and third Thursday, we will not be here. I hope it's okay. So yes, second and fourth Thursdays starting November, 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Also, today is Thursday, which means there is new writing for you to check out on Hood Communists. Speaking of political education about Cuba, there is a really incredible Cuba syllabus on Hood Communists published today. It is a collection of articles, podcasts, videos, and books that you can check out to raise your basic consciousness about the U.S. blockade on Cuba, about Cuba's solidarity with African liberation movements, and about why the U.S. is attacking Cuba in the first place. So please check that out. We have also published some more reads about AFRICOM, Revolutionary African Analysis, about why so many imperialist countries are competing for control of Africa. And being posted shortly is an interview with our comrade Obi Egbuna Jr. about Zimbabwe, about Robert Mugabe. So the film series on Saturday is going to be Mugabe, Villain or Hero. And to get ready for that, you should definitely check out this interview on Hood Communist Radio with Obi, dropping some knowledge and some truth bombs about why we should support Robert Mugabe. Why Zimbabwe land reform was actually successful. Why Zimbabwe is being attacked and lied on by imperialism. Check it out. Lastly, if you have enjoyed this program, if you can hear us talking, if you can see mine and Monica's faces, then please, if you're not active in an organization fighting for justice, we need you to join an organization, comrade. We need you to get off of the sidelines and actively engage in the struggle for the liberation of Africa, for the liberation of African people, and for the liberation of all oppressed peoples worldwide. We are facing, in a system of capitalism, one of the most organized enemies that has ever existed. So in order to defeat an organized enemy, you need to build superior organization. And joining organizations or starting organizations fighting for justice is the way that we can begin to build that superior organization. We used to say, or I used to say, any organization is better than no organization. And like to some extent, I still believe that, because I feel like when you join a shitty or crappy organization, excuse my language, that they at least expose you to what doesn't work. Like the very first organization that I was part of was very reformist, was like all up in the mayor's office, organizing petitions and stuff. And I realized through that experience, especially by having like face-to-face conversations with a mayor, that man did not give a crap and that was not going to do anything. So I am grateful for my experience in an organization that I was not politically aligned with, that had many contradictions, because it helped me realize what was not going to work. However, there are many organizations that exist that are straight up abusive to their members. And so now when I say join an organization, I want to like be specific about what folks should look for in the organization they join. One essential component is some kind of systematic and organized political education to raise the consciousness of every single member. What political education does is gives us the tools to think critically and independently. We can't have a situation where one person is like explaining the situation to everybody else. Bye, Monica. We have to have a situation where everybody is empowered, everybody is consciousness, everybody is conscious, everybody's on the same level of PE, so that people can dissent, so that people can develop their own leadership, so that people can get engaged in critique in a meaningful way. So make sure that any organization you start or that you join has some organized form of political education or is open to you introducing them. Also make sure that any organization you join allows you to dissent. You should be able to disagree with anyone up in there, whether it's the person that started the organization, whether it's someone who's been in for 10 years and you've only been in for a few weeks. There should not be a situation where they're like, you don't have the seniority to disagree, or it's not your place to disagree. Revolutionary organization, building a revolutionary movement requires struggle. Struggle means that we're not always going to agree, and that's okay, that we'll move through it together. But if you're ever find yourself in a context where you're not allowed to do that, that is a red flag, y'all. That is a red flag. You also want to make sure that any organization you join has a clear structure that is transparent to you, that is clear how folks make decisions. It is clear if like positions of leadership exist, how people get into those positions and how they are accountable to folks under their leadership. It's clear how people can move into those positions. So you want to make sure that any organization you start or you join, that you understand the structure, that it is transparent, that is accountable to the membership. So those are a few of the things that I look for in organizations now, that I hope that y'all will look for as well. I'm going to go on the AAPRP Kaji Circles Pansula podcast to talk a little bit more about this with my comrade Jamila next week. So you can hear more details about it, and we'll definitely post that link. But yeah, I just thought that it's more responsible to be specific about what good organization means, because there's a lot of folks doing a lot of things out here. Some of them are harmful. So yeah, let's be more specific. Anywho, this has been Weekly Pan-African News. We appreciate y'all so much for joining us. We hope that you will tune in again next Thursday at 1 p.m. Pay attention to the time change. 1 p.m. Mountain Time for some political education about Cuba. Now stay tuned for some jams and for some flyers for upcoming AAPRP events, and have a good rest of your day.
Hey! Atom! Reloaded! Atom! Reloaded! Tune it! Ha! Yawa Krum! Yawa Krum! Rasta Fuwa Krum! Rasta Fuwa Krum! Yawa Krum! Harok Fuwa Krum! Harok Fuwa Krum! Yawa Krum! Fresh boys, fresh girls! Fresh boys, fresh girls! Yawa Krum! Where am I? I'm Shafe, I'm Kwajalami! Yawa Krum! Rasta Fuwa Krum! Rasta Fuwa Krum! Yawa Krum! Harok Fuwa Krum! Harok Fuwa Krum! Yawa Krum! Fresh boys, fresh girls! Fresh boys, fresh girls! Yawa Krum! Where am I? I'm Shafe, I'm Kwajalami! Yawa Krum! Krum! Me wo Krum! What up, so the young Shimbo, the Jimmy, Magunko, the Lions Den, Tata Boom, don't try me, Tribo, Harof, where you feel in some mampo, the Shesha, the Divo money in the back, the cash, I got them before, no be property, depend near intimate sympathy, Manon Pisha, Pasho, Nanatati, Alomo, Casapaco, and the dry daddy, Yawo Krum, Bisakubabu, and Etaju, the Tudo, Untimate Yamugu, the Discapudo, Send up to Su, the blessing now, I let you Rasta Fuwa Krum, Rasta Fuwa Krum, Yawa Krum, Harok fuwa krum, haro fuwa krum. Fresh boys, fresh girls, fresh boys, fresh girls. Where mommy, I'm Jefe, I'm Kwajalami. Rasta fuwa krum, Rasta fuwa krum. Haro fuwa krum, haro fuwa krum. Fresh boys, fresh girls, fresh boys, fresh girls. Where mommy, I'm Jefe, I'm Kwajalami.
Them times if I'm in the manty, Friday night, a boy and natch it. Natch it, forget to wash it. And if I'm not just mama son tonight, I will I was so come magazine. Yeah, born to a yo salamujin. And now join your table, bitch, feeling free. Last time pensa, one roll nicodine. And you dope. When you see car, you the joke. Guess if I was broke, cause coffee, you broke. Work hard on the low. Anything for the dough, like check the dough. Come at twice, what in your boarding. I'm only too strong to me here, hoarding. And then we will get that's what I'm saying. You can ask about me way back, I don't sing. You will
Rasta fuwa krum, Rasta fuwa krum. Haro fuwa krum, haro fuwa krum. Fresh boys, fresh girls, fresh boys, fresh girls. Where mommy, I'm Jefe, I'm Kwajalami. Rasta fuwa krum, Rasta fuwa krum. Haro fuwa krum, haro fuwa krum. Fresh boys, fresh girls, fresh boys, fresh girls. Where mommy, I'm Jefe, I'm Kwajalami. Roma yende. Ya brokeke, so ready asa, so do fun sa man pusase. Today be today, obi ajini pay. Sister Aisha, yan shisha, no cocaine. Oh, new generation, money belongs to the youth. Some build mansions, others they drink pepper soup. What be the action? You for look sharp, don't be thief. Millions and thousands, let's be one and just forget the beef. Rasta fuwa krum, Rasta fuwa krum. Haro fuwa krum, haro fuwa krum. Fresh boys, fresh girls, fresh boys, fresh girls. Where mommy, I'm Jefe, I'm Kwajalami. Rasta fuwa krum, Rasta fuwa krum. Haro fuwa krum, haro fuwa krum. Fresh boys, fresh girls, fresh boys, fresh girls. Where mommy, I'm Jefe, I'm Kwajalami. What's up, shaker? My boy,